An elder leader in priestly robes sends 12 scouts to explore a distant land, showing that stepping into the unknown with faith empowers our journey. The scouts trek through a fertile valley filled with abundant fruit, showing that God's promises bear fruit when we take the first step. They pause atop a hill and behold towering giants and fortified cities, teaching that obstacles loom large when fear overshadows faith. 10 scouts return, trembling, and share a fearful report, showing that doubt can paralyze an entire community. 2 scouts stand firm and declare victory with God's help, showing that courageous faith overturns overwhelming odds. The people panic and murmur in terror, teaching that collective fear can derail God's plan. They refuse to enter the promised land despite God's command, showing that rejecting divine guidance leads to stagnation. God declares they will wander for 40 years in the wilderness, showing that disbelief incurs generational consequences. Despite the decree, 2 faithful scouts lament but remain hopeful, showing that steadfast faith endures discouragement. Finally, the faithful prepare to enter the land at the appointed time, showing that determined trust in God paves the way to promised victory. The people grumble for water, showing that even in desperation we often forget God's care. They accuse Moses of bringing them to death, revealing that complaining blinds us to God's provision. Moses and priests stand before the rock, reminding us that obedience demands humble trust. Moses strikes the rock twice in frustration, showing that impatience can distort God's instructions. Water gushes forth from the rock, teaching that God's provision flows even when we falter. Thirsty travelers drink abundantly to show that God satisfies our deepest needs beyond our efforts. Moses sees the blessing yet faces consequence, revealing that God's standards surpass our achievements. A divine voice warns Moses, reminding that humility matters more than results. Future generations remember Meribah, showing that obedient trust leaves a lasting legacy. Trusting God yields ongoing refreshment, teaching that in humble dependence His grace flows freely. The people grumbled against God and Moses to show that unresolved frustration opens the door to peril. Because of their complaints, God sent fiery serpents into the camp, showing that ignoring wrong fuels destructive consequences. Fiery serpents bit the people, showing that choices rooted in anger can inflict lasting harm. Many Israelites died from the serpent bites to show that unchecked rebellion leads to loss. The survivors came to Moses confessing their sin and asking him to pray for them, showing that repentance opens the path to mercy. God instructed Moses to craft a bronze serpent and mount it on a pole to show that obedience to divine instruction leads to salvation. Moses made a serpent of bronze and lifted it upon a pole as God commanded to show that simple acts of faith reveal God's healing power. Anyone bitten who looked at the bronze serpent was healed at once to show that fixing our eyes on God's remedy brings instant restoration. A single glance of faith turned deadly despair into life-giving hope to show that trust in God transforms hopeless situations. The bronze serpent became a symbol of God's mercy and healing to show that faith, even in small acts, can unlock divine deliverance. Messengers from Moab present a silver chest to a prophet, showing that sometimes offers from others test our willingness to align with a higher purpose. The prophet mounts his donkey and sets out, revealing that obedience to unseen guidance guards against misguided intentions. The donkey veers off the path to avoid an unseen presence, showing that deeper perception can sense obstacles invisible to us. Frustrated, the prophet lashes out at his donkey, illustrating that impatience can blind us to hidden warnings meant for our protection. The donkey squeezes between a wall and a tree to avoid an unseen presence, revealing that protective instincts sometimes lead us into tight spots for our own safety. Again struck in frustration, the prophet misses that the donkey tries to protect him, showing that anger can cloud our understanding of loyal companions' intentions. God opens the donkey's mouth, showing that unexpected voices can deliver divine messages when conventional means fail. The prophet's eyes are opened to see a radiant figure blocking the way, revealing that humility allows us to perceive truths beyond our limited sight. Humbled, the prophet bows and receives a warning not to speak his own words, showing that surrendering pride opens the way to true purpose. Before the king of Moab, the prophet blesses the camp of Israel instead of cursing, revealing that aligning with divine will turns opposition into unexpected favor. God speaks to Moses to teach that when his timing arrives, he prepares a new leader behind the scenes. Moses gathers Joshua, a young warrior, and Eleazar the priest before the congregation to show that public affirmation strengthens God's chosen. Moses lays his hands on Joshua to teach that faithful leadership passes to those who've proven patient obedience. Joshua stands before the community to show that humility and readiness mark God's appointed leaders. The priest Eleazar blesses Joshua to teach that spiritual endorsement anchors leadership in God's authority. The congregation watches in silence to show that collective acknowledgement empowers God's chosen to step forward. Joshua receives the leader's staff to teach that God's promises continue through those who remain steadfast servants. Israel's elders stand behind Joshua to show that unity and support propel leaders toward tomorrow's victories. Joshua bows in gratitude to teach that humility before God's plan sets the stage for successful leadership. Joshua steps forward to lead Israel into Canaan to show that God raises new leaders when faithful servanthood plants seeds for future triumphs.